Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, it is election day, and no matter how the numbers shake out tonight, Pittsburgh will be facing some pretty big challenges in 2026. Taxes are down, overtime is up, and we don't have any more federal money to help cover the bills. Today, I am with Trib Live's City Hall reporter Julia Brdelsky to talk about the to-do list awaiting our next Pittsburgh mayor. It's Tuesday, November 4th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Julia, hello. Welcome back to CityCast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So you've been gearing up for Election Day. I swear you have published more than like half the reporters in town combined in the last few days. What have you been most focused on? Like, what are you keeping your eye on? Because I'm curious if like the city feels poised for change or if it's just like a lot of buildup for something we kind of already know the outcome of.
That's a good question. I mean, I think that we know that some kind of change has to be coming because we know that the incumbent was voted out in the primary in May. So ever since then, we've kind of been ready for something. Because of the overwhelming voter registration advantage for the Democrats, it's largely assumed that Corey O'Connor will be the next mayor. So very likely going to stay in Democratic hands. But O'Connor has a different vision for a lot of things facing the city. He's pitched a different kind of fiscal responsibility, kind of reining in spending differently. He's talked about having a different vision for downtown. He's talked about a different approach for how he would get nonprofits to pay their fair share, as they like to say, towards the city. So there definitely will be some changes with the new administration. And I think that we've already started to see some of the tension around that, just as we've seen, city council much more divisive and much more divided recently between the Gainey backers and the O'Connor backers. And that hasn't really slowed down since the primary. So we're already starting to see kind of some members of council pushing for a different direction that they think will be a little bit more aligned with an O'Connor administration. And then, as I think we were planning to talk about as well, there are also contested council races. So we also could potentially see, new faces on council. And there's a particularly interesting race in the West End to replace Teresa Cale-Smith as she retires.
Been on council for 16 years and also just like has a fun sense of humor. I'm curious how any replacement might change, like kind of how council talks to each other, because she's been a little bit of a firebrand over the years in different ways.
Right. I think you're not going to quite replace Teresa Cale-Smith. She just has a certain, brand about her. She's very direct. And I don't know that you're going to get quite the same voice on council with anybody else.
But you've got her chief of staff running, who certainly has the background, if not that specific flavor, right? And then you've got a fairly high-profile local Republican that's making a run for it. I mean, what would you expect frankly, the unexpected happens if a Republican were to prevail in District 2?
So what's interesting is because we have a Democratic mayor, and it is widely assumed that the Democrat will win that race, we have a Democrat in the controller's office, and it's widely assumed that there will be at least 8 Democrats on city council still. So it's not like having one Republican on there is going to wildly change the way that Pittsburgh operates, right? Like one Republican would not be able to push through a Republican agenda against the wishes of a large, overwhelming Democratic majority. But it would just be, I think, an interesting dynamic in having that different perspective. I know Erin Coper, the Republican candidate, told me that she thinks she could work across the aisle and, work with the Democratic colleagues on council. But obviously that brings in a really different perspective. There has not been a Republican on city council since 1939. So we're talking about the year that Adolf Hitler invaded Poland. It's been such a long time since we've had that diversity of voices on council where a different party was represented. So I think that would be a really interesting dynamic to see what a Republican would advocate for and how much support a Republican could get for maybe more moderate ideas. And I think that would be honestly just a really big change to the way that council operates in terms of having a real dissenting voice who does not believe in, all of the more democratic leaning things that right now are unanimously accepted in City Hall most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about like some of the things because she gave a speech at the Republican National Convention last year, and she's aligned herself with Trump. I think I've gotten the sense that she would still call herself aligned with MAGA, Make America Great Again. Like, I could almost see if she were to prevail that maybe that would galvanize the rest of council, because like at the moment it's just Democrats fighting with Democrats for the way to do a policy they all kind of agree they maybe want to do anyway, and that's true of a lot of ideas that they propose. If there were a Republican on council, I feel like the 8 of them might get along better.
That's a good point. I think the other thing that's interesting is, that's one vote that you can't count on for anything. There are some areas where, for example, the affordable housing bills, where there's some division among the Democrats, but they all want more or less the same thing. And as they're sitting here kind of fighting about the nuances of how best to approach it, we're trying to count to, just needing 5 council members to support it. And here, if we throw in a Republican in the mix, this is somebody who might not back either of the Democratic proposals from the 2 warring Democrat factions of council. So it makes the math harder on some of these equations to get to a majority of council votes even. So even if she can't necessarily push through a really conservative Republican agenda as the only Republican on council, potentially, I think having even just one Republican on there could hinder the progress of some things that the Democrats want to get across, or could maybe force, as you said, the other 8 members to coalesce and compromise differently. It would be a really interesting dynamic right now.
Yeah, and we should say the other folks running for office, Teresa Kale-Smith's longtime chief of staff, Kim Salinetro, the Democrat, also an independent on the ballot, David Tessiter. Sometimes in Pittsburgh, when there's an independent on the ballot, you will see the vote get split between an independent and a Democrat. So I think this one will definitely be one to watch. I did hear you say, though, that you think the others will stay largely Democratic. We have 2 other city council seats that are contested right now. Sounds like maybe you think we're going to stick with the incumbents there.
I mean, of course, we can't say for certain, but, just knowing the history that it has been almost 100 years since we've had a Republican on council or in the mayor's office, there's obviously a strong advantage for the Democrats in terms of just having that history behind them and having the voter registration advantage. But yeah, in District 4, Councilman Anthony Coghill has a challenger in Republican Tracy Larger. And then in District 6, the council president, our Daniel Lavelle, is facing a challenger from a Republican, Jacob Dumont. So those are 2 other races that we will certainly be watching. And I mean, there is actually a chance that we could have up to 3 Republicans on city council if all 3 of those challengers would win. And that would certainly really tip the scales in terms of what we've seen in City Hall. That would be a big change.
I mean, if this year's taught us anything, it's that Republicans are on a streak right now. So we will see how it shakes out. I mean, regardless of the makeup of council, I'm curious, like, what proposals or ideas you think might be affected by any change, right? Like, we know we're going to have at least 1 new face, could be up to 3. I'm thinking, like, for example, affordable housing, the incentive program that, we're waiting on the Planning Commission to talk about. Like, I don't know, that one, the fleet maintenance, like, how do you think these things might be affected?
Yeah, so I think just logistically, it's worth noting that zoning proposals do not die at the end of a legislative session. They remain. So the affordable housing incentive program that you mentioned, this fight over, mandatory versus voluntary inclusionary zoning, that's still on the table in January if it's not resolved before then. And I mean, that is already a little bit challenging to see or to try to predict where that would go, because there are a lot of moving parts with different amendments.
There's a court challenge.
Right. And it was going to be a narrow margin no matter what in terms of getting a vote for that, especially if we were looking at potentially having to override a mayoral veto, which, under Gainey, he has indicated that he would veto the most recent proposal of that bill. So, I mean, that would definitely be something to watch. I think also another one that I'm just really interested to keep an eye on is how they look at the budget. Last year we heard grumblings that some council members weren't pleased with the budget that Gainey had pitched and thought that it, didn't fund certain things enough, or it wasn't, properly accounting for certain expenses, but they didn't make a lot of changes. And they, ultimately passed something very similar to what the mayor had pitched. This year, obviously, it will be the existing council members who approve a budget before new folks come in January, but that council could still make amendments to the budget or could still try to, do certain things to rein in spending going into the future years. And I'm really curious to see what that looks like, because that's kind of at an inflection point right now where the budget is really, really tight. There's a lot of very serious concern. And I think having some new people on council and someone new in the mayor's office could potentially change the way that the city is looking at its finances as well.
Today's episode is sponsored in part by Family House. For families traveling here for medical care, the cost of food is just another expense to worry about. But Family House's daily healthy breakfast program takes away some of that stress, while also providing a little connection. The program's available to all Family House guests, and it provides nourishing meals, a welcoming space, and the chance to meet others facing similar medical challenges. But the cost of this meal program is going up. Family House needs your help. Every donation helps keep breakfast and the support it provides available to those who need it most. You can give at familyhouse.org/donate and save the date for Family House's Day of Giving. It's December 2nd on Giving Tuesday. Family House really is a home away from home for patients and caregivers here in Pittsburgh, and it's the preferred lodging partner for a lot of our healthcare systems here. So again, if you want to support their cause, head over to familyhouse.org/donate.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Frick Museums and Gardens and their world premiere of The Scandinavian Home, Landscape and Lore. The exhibit is open right now, and it is the perfect way to embrace the start of winter while still feeling all warm and cozy. There's this sense of magic to it all, because princesses, Vikings, trolls, gnomes, and folktales all come to life in this exhibition. The Scandinavian Home's got this mix of homey comfort and mythic wonder. The show features more than 100 objects from a private, never-seen-before collection. So you'll get to admire fine decorative and folk arts, so think furniture, ceramics, glass, paintings, textiles, sculptures, graphics, and metalwork. So much stuff, all from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And after debuting at the Frick, this exhibit is going to move on to other museums, so do not miss your chance to get that first look. The Scandinavian Home, Landscape and Lore is on view through January 11th, 2026. Get your tickets at thefrickpittsburgh.org. Coziness awaits you.
Well, so of course, all of this, everything that we're talking about today, and that folks will decide, throughout the course of the night, goes hand in hand with the mayor's office, and presumably it will be Democrat Corey O'Connor, 62nd mayor of Pittsburgh. Let's talk about what's going to be on his plate, like what we're guessing here, but like his first few days. What do you expect the new administration to prioritize?
He will have a lot on his plate. A couple of kind of long-term issues that he will inherit are going to be things that he's not going to fix in the first couple of days, but that I think he's going to try to hit the ground probably looking for long-term solutions. And, I'm thinking specifically of, the aging vehicle fleet. He campaigned heavily on needing new ambulances and new vehicles. We're hearing of, emergency vehicles breaking down and things like that. I know O'Connor has pitched asking nonprofits to chip in specifically with buying things like that. So I imagine that pretty quickly he's going to want to start having those conversations. That would be a big win for him in the early days of his administration if he could get, say, Highmark or UPMC or somebody to buy the city a couple of ambulances.
Which sounds like kind of small potatoes. Like, I know ambulances are expensive, but like when we're talking about wanting the nonprofits to pay millions in payments in lieu of taxes, an ambulance or two feels tiny.
But I think that because of how much need there is in the fleet, I think that would be perceived at least as being substantial step in the right direction, at least.
Oh, no, I think it would be a huge feather in his cap. I just think it's hilarious, the scale. That's all. In a sad way. Hilarious in a sad way.
But I think that, when we look at the budget and just how tight it is, I think that even little wins are going to mean a lot over the next couple of years. And as you said, it's kind of sad that we've gotten to that point. But I think that the when you look at the city budget, we are at a point where even little incremental savings or investments into the right things are going to look like big wins right now.
And we've talked so much on the show about, our budget being tight. That's aided tremendously by reporting like yours, Julia. But So taxes are down. And one of the things that Corey has talked a lot about through the campaign has been wanting to grow the city, wanting to champion us, wanting to convince people to move here and move their businesses here. I mean, do you have any sense that that's something he's started working on, or that there's appetite for that?
I think that's going to be a big priority of his. And I think what's interesting here is he actually kind of inherits a couple of starting points, if you will. The NFL draft coming in April could be leveraged as kind of an advertisement for Pittsburgh. And he has spoken a little bit to wanting to make sure that Pittsburgh on the national stage is promoted as a place where you could come start your business or raise your family. So I think that, he has 4 months to figure out kind of how he wants to use the draft to champion Pittsburgh. And I think that will be something he will have to prioritize early, because he has, 4 months before that comes. But that's also, in a way, something that he inherits from the last administration that's already underway. And he also inherits a $600 million plan for downtown revitalization,
which is very much in progress right now.
Right. And I think what's interesting about that is, Mayor Gainey really wanted to focus primarily on residential conversion. We've heard Corey O'Connor saying that he wants more of a mix where there is some mixed income housing component, but also more businesses, more opportunities for entrepreneurs and things like that. So
yeah, he's really been flying the flag for like the main street of it all, and I feel like that ties into the draft stuff too. Like he told us he wanted to leading up to the draft, he wanted people on the phone, trying to call CEOs and call business development people. And when he meets them during the draft, he does not want that to be the first touch point. He wants it to be the fifth.
Exactly. And I think that'll be something that he has to hit the ground running on, because as we said, the draft is coming in April. So if you want to be able to leverage that as an opportunity, you have to start doing that really as soon as you take office. If you have a revitalization plan already underway, if you want to kind of mold that to fit your vision, you've got to kind of hit the ground running on those things. So I definitely imagine that those will be top priorities as soon as he steps in.
We are with you today thanks to the Greater Pittsburgh Nonprofit Partnership, a program of the Forbes Funds. For 2 decades, GPNP has been helping local nonprofits lead with impact. And every year, they pause to recognize the incredible people behind all of that work. The GPNP Awards honor nonprofit leaders who drive innovation, equity, and lasting change across Western Pennsylvania. From youth empowerment and technology to advocacy and community action, these are the people making our region stronger every day. If you know someone like that, nominate them now for the 2025 GPNP Awards and join hundreds of changemakers celebrating their impact at this year's GPNP Summit. Head to gpnpsummit.org to learn more and submit your nomination, because when we celebrate good work, we inspire even more of it. What about overtime? Because I feel like you and I have both been living and breathing this whole thing about this, because a report just came out that confirms that now we have officially in 2025, with 3 months left to go, spent more on overtime than we are capable of paying, and there's more coming. Do you think that Corey O'Connor's administration will be able to get a handle on that in a way that maybe the current administration just struggled to?
Exactly. And that's exactly it. So, the city continues to pay the public safety and public works folks who are making overtime, but it does get pulled either from the reserves or from other areas where there would potentially be cost savings. I think the challenge here is that the city cannot stop using overtime for essential employees like police officers and paramedics. It's just not going to happen. Nobody wants the city to say, okay, you've worked 40 hours today, but there's an emergency and we're just going to not handle that public safety crisis until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
It really is kind of an impossible problem. I get it.
It is. So I think though that the issue comes down to budgeting accurately for it. I think that it is unlikely that there will be significant reductions in overtime next year, especially because we know we are going to be paying public works and public safety officials overtime to handle the draft and all of
it's going to be so expensive.
And that's going to be an expense. And then you factor that in on top of the overtime we're already using. And I don't think that there I don't see a pathway to drastically reduce overtime. I think that the question that I am hearing officials ask is, how do we account for that appropriately in the budget? And I'm hearing people say that the preliminary budget that Mayor Gainey pitched maybe does not have enough budgeted for overtime. So I think that the challenge here, and again, this is a challenge that in a perfect world, City Council and the current administration fix by the end of the year in the budget. But I think the challenge is finding money in the budget so that there is adequate budgeting for the overtime that we will use, probably more so than trying to drive down the amount of overtime being used right now.
What if the nonprofits paid for the overtime?
I mean, that would be a really interesting one to explore. It would help the city budget a lot, to be honest.
I mean, because so much of it's like around law enforcement, public safety, our emergency services. Like, I mean, I feel like that like is almost hand in hand with the ambulances. I'll leave that to Corey O'Connor to make the pitch. What about the school district? Because I feel like that's been one, especially as we have that growth conversation, like trying to talk people into moving to Pittsburgh. The school district is like a big red flag for a lot of people. Like there's bright spots, but it's also, it depends on the school.
What's hard is that the mayor doesn't have direct authority over the school district, since that is a separate entity. So, we know that I recall the Gainey administration talking about wanting to kind of increase partnerships with PPS. And I know they had some like internship opportunities for students and things like that, but it's not like the mayor can come in and overhaul the school district. But it is interesting because we do hear O'Connor talking so much about how Pittsburgh needs to be the first choice where people would want to raise their families. He has two young children. He's clearly passionate about that. He has an education degree. He's, I think, wants to make the city somewhere where you would want to raise your kids. But at the same time, he's not going to be able to directly manage what Pittsburgh Public Schools does. But
yeah, I just wonder if there's anything there for like, it's not authority so much as influence, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely an option, some kind of influence there, or some kind of, partnership cooperation agreements. I know I've heard some people pitch like, could the city and the school district team up to keep, indoor pools at certain schools open into the evening for youth programming, and maybe, city lifeguards would be involved, or, I've heard different iterations, but, there are, I think, opportunities for partnerships, whether they are kind of smaller, more just extracurricular kind of activity things, or whether there are maybe conversations about resource sharing or something like that. But I haven't heard a specific plan for what that would look like yet.
Feels nebulous. Got it. Well, let's circle back to public safety then, because, we've also been without a permanent police chief for a while now. I assume that's got to be top of his list.
Yeah, O'Connor has said that he intends to name a new police chief candidate before he even takes office, if he wins. So I would imagine that we probably hear that name getting pitched out by, mid to late December at the latest. And I imagine that very, very soon after taking office, he will formally submit a nominee to City Council. I think that has been something he has campaigned on since the primary. I know there was so much talk during the primary where he was very critical of Mayor Gainey for having those rapid leadership changes in the Bureau. There was concern that it was bad for morale and for recruitment and retention in the Bureau, which are also top concerns. So I would definitely keep an eye out for a new police chief nominee very, very quickly.
So what else is awaiting tonight's winners come January? Anything else that you've got your eye on?
On the topic of public safety, the police force is currently at its smallest staffing numbers in about 2 decades. So not just a new chief, a new mayor is also going to have to look to recruit new rank and file officers and get those numbers up. And I think that's something that is particularly concerning to officials when we talk about overtime and things like that. When you have staffing challenges, it demands more overtime. It puts more strain on the officers who are working when we have big events like an NFL draft. So I think that'll be a priority.
Constricting the force, right, as we go into like a massive event like that is also got to be its own challenge.
Absolutely. I would also just mention, since we did mention the nonprofits, I do think it's interesting that, Mayor Gainey has ongoing legal challenges against some of these nonprofits. He's trying to challenge the tax-exempt status of several of their properties. So that's also something that I am curious to see if a new administration continues, whether he withdraws those lawsuits or uses them as maybe leverage, where he says, I will withdraw these suits and stop doing that if you provide X, Y, or Z. Like, that's kind of interesting. I don't know exactly how quickly I imagine that would happen because, courts are slow moving entities.
Courts are slow, but Corey's known that he's going to have this leverage since April. So like those are conversations that he could have been sitting on all this time.
Exactly. And so I am curious to see if we see a big change in the approach there. I don't know if that's leverage or if that's something that he just, moves away from or continues or does differently. But like that's also an interesting thing that he will inherit kind of midstream.
Well, Julia, I assume we are just at the beginning of your workday. I hope that the rest of election day, election night treats you well, and that maybe there's some pizza at the end of it for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you want to support the show, you can find all the details, the perks, the swag, the opportunities to hang out with us. It's all at membership.citycast.fm. We will be back tomorrow with more from around the city. We'll talk to you soon. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I feel like there's a butterfly effect with any job in government, basically. Like, I mean, for the one I always think of is like the plumber that was supposed to service the water fountains in the city, and we only had one. We had one guy for a while, and that is a job that you need a degree of redundancy for, and like maybe a manual to teach new people how to do it. Like, it's a small example, but it does matter to how the rest of us get to experience the city.